Parashat Shemot. For this week's Parashat, I gave the title Yad Vashemot because we are going to speak about Holocaust attempts. Indeed, the Parashat of the week tells the story of the first Holocaust attempt in history. Shemot, the second book of Moses, the second book of the Torah, does not mean Exodus, but rather names, because it begins with the list of descendants of the sons of Israel since their settlement in Egypt. Several centuries after their arrival on the territory, a new pharaoh takes power over the country who does not remember Joseph and does not know the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob either. He is a pharaoh who cared little for the genealogy of the Jewish people and could not remember the origins, the ancestors, and the benefits of the chosen people. In the course of modern history, Franz Joseph of Austria was a similar kind of pharaoh to the one who reigned during Joseph's time. He also recognized in us values that he used to his advantage while granting us great freedom and respect rarely experienced in our history. Like Joseph, our modern-day ancestors living in the times of the Austro-Hungarian Empire enjoyed many social benefits, freedom, and power with which they could serve the interests of the Habsburg Empire. The situation was identical during the Babylonian exile, when the Jewish community was none other than the flagship of the Babylonian society of the time. There are always some people who do recognize in us reliability, ingenuity, and a qualified workforce. Then, there is often a pharaoh who may be Egyptian himself or Austrian in this case, but who forgets Joseph's memory. He persists in refusing to admit that there were once a Jewish people without whom his empire and his people would perhaps no longer exist, or at least in a much less glorious way. Such a later Austrian pharaoh was of course Hitler himself. The Jew is welcome only as long as his extraordinary faculties can be used to strengthen their interests, because everything they touch is blessed and fruitful. But as soon as the fruit ripens, the gardener is rejected, slandered, and attacked. It was his own jealousy that caused fear in Pharaoh's mind. Indeed, Israel had multiplied to form a people more numerous and more powerful than the Egyptians, at least according to his own words related in the Torah. He saw in this proliferation a threat to the empire and especially to his throne. He could not tolerate the idea that there was a foreign entity within the country which in addition thrives better than the natives. He finally decides to exterminate them. He first tries to carry out his evil work by using midwives and eventually sends his soldiers to eliminate all male newborns. He tolerates girls, but sees boys as a threat, as they can become soldiers who can become allied with the enemies of the empire. He thinks that they must be careful and get rid of the Jews in time. Here we see unfounded fears and accusations, such as those we are constantly targeted with for centuries. These slanders are not only wrong, but the reality is often quite the opposite. Pharaoh accuses Israel of treason against the state, while it was precisely because of Joseph that the country is still standing. Joseph showed peerless loyalty to Egypt, even though he was not even Egyptian himself. In addition, it was this same Joseph who strengthened the power of the pharaoh by putting all the lands of the country under the control of the crown. He was the one who saved the people from famine and strengthened Pharaoh's power. Then, the descendants of Joseph and his brothers became the artisans and builders of the empire. They even cultivated the lands of Egypt. Pharaoh is tormented by two antagonistic feelings. On the one hand, he wanted to get rid of the Jews, but he also wanted to exploit their skills and to make them work. Perhaps he too would have liked to assimilate them so that they become Egyptians, just as the Austrian emperor mentioned above tried to do. However, assimilation would have precisely dissolved all the qualities in us that were so precious to them. The situation was similar in the case of Luther, in the case of Hitler, and in the case of many others. This is how Pharaoh declares before Moses that he does not know his Elohim. In other words, he simply declares, "We do not want your people or your God, but just the benefits we can draw from you all." Well, as disciples, as newborn believers in the Messiah, we often experience similar situations. When we are in covenant with Yahuwah, our buried values just revive and become visible to everyone. The world wants this treasure and intends to use it for its own purposes. They have great respect and admiration for people like us. Indeed, our faith prevents us from committing sin. We respect the law of Elohim and those of the world, which makes us extremely reliable people, less inclined to deceive anyone. They know that they can trust us, and moreover, that our actions are blessed by the Almighty. So they have respect for us because they need us. Then, after a while, jealousy begins to torment them from the inside because they feel that themselves are not part of the people of Elohim. In their eyes, we do incarnate judgments and are like spiritual mirrors. And indeed, it is exactly the role that has been given to us by the Eternal. What they need is our profitability. The rest does not interest them. They do not choose the same path as ours because that would imply too much renunciation in their lives, and thus they reject any submission to Yahuwah. This way we end up being thorns in their eyes. All that remains for them in order to appease their conscience is to bring us back to Egypt and try to assimilate us again. In short, they want to convince us to deny our covenant with Yahuwah in order to kill us in spirit. But in the best cases, of course, this project fails, and there comes the relief of the Almighty in one form or another, which may also be preceded by judgments, plagues, and other signs. Today's spiritual Holocaust attempt. The most fatal and widespread form of spiritual Holocaust of the end times is the delegitimization of the modern state of Israel, and within that, the alienation of Ashkenazi Jews themselves from their own Israelite identity by all kinds of distorted Khazarian theories. But this will be the topic of another article and video of mine, where we will see that yes, maybe we really are the descendants of Khazarian people, if some people want it so much. But may these malicious pharaohs not be surprised at the end to see who we really are, these Ashkenazi Jews in Khazarian clothing, when Elohim removes the veil on this mystery. The name of this article and video is The Gathering of the Tribes of Israel, that will give more insights on this topic. But for now, I would like the accusers to recognize the enemy Pharaoh living and working in them, and to recognize him in time, so that through the rebirth, the blood of Yahushua will be placed on the doorposts of their hearts as well. And this, before they go too far and commit the same mistake that the Pharaoh of the time, that was so hostile to the Jewish people and Elohim, that he ended up wanting their death but it was finally his own firstborn and his own army that were destroyed in the end. And I also invite you to see the fate of the Turkish parliamentarian struck down by heart attack last December, just after his speech against Israel, who dares to defend itself against its enemies. These phenomena are very serious warnings of the end times, so that many repent and do not have to suffer the second death as well. Because those who claim today that one part of the apple of Yahuwah's eyes is the mere offspring of a dark and foreign people, will eventually be declared as foreigners themselves before the Messiah when he comes back to judge the world, and eternal darkness will actually turn to be their own final heritage.